Hello, welcome to section 9 part 2 of the lightning slash electric tutorial module. And in the last video we looked at the sort of movement between lightning, how it appears, how fast it is, you know, sort of just to get a feel for what it is in real life, and just like how you can adapt that to your effects. And then the second half of the video we spent making one of the harder lightnings in my opinion to make, which is ribbon lightning, mainly because it is one of the better ones to become more realistic, as you have access to jitter and just randomness, a lot more randomness involved. However, it does take quite a while to get the result you need. So honestly, with the time that I had to make something, I think it turned out pretty okay. Anyway, in this video we shall be moving on to making it in a shader and then taking it over to Niagara, and also just making utilizing the texture that we made in the very beginning, which is this one here. So first things first is we need to make ourselves a shader. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a material and call it m_lightning shader, and we're going to set it to translucent and unlit, as we have done majority of the time. And we need something called the motion 4-way chaos node. Now it doesn't come up when you search for it, as it's not clarified as a node itself, it's actually clarified as a material function. So we need to search for material function, grab that, and then we want to search for it in here, and here we go. If it does not appear for you, it's because your engine content will be off. So if you just turn this on, you'll be able to access it. Now we're going to need two scalars with S, and name this speed, and name this one divisor, and we're going to give it a default of 3 and 3. Plug it into here. And the last thing we're going to need is a texture. Now, textures do not plug into this because this is a texture 2D, which means we need to convert it to a texture object, which it will now plug into there. And we're going to grab ourselves a texture. For this, we are also going to use an engine texture node, engine texture, which I believe is just called noise, which is this one here, t_noise01. If you don't have this, just make sure your engine content is turned on. Now, we are then going to grab ourselves a text coordinate and an add, and we're also going to grab ourselves both channels from this texture, and then we're going to plug that into the add with the texture coordinates and put that here. Now, next what we want to do is we want to sort of like break up the lightning. So we're going to grab ourselves a radial gradient exponential, and then we're going to grab ourselves the position of this radial, which will be set to 2. This way I've done it before, and I've seen a lot of other people do it. The only problem with this technique nowadays is you tend to not get as much control through the shader when you're making lightning, and this is why I wanted to showcase it in case you don't necessarily have the textures available. This is something you can sort of do as a quick mock-up if you're trying to show an idea, or you're trying to get an early block-out stage of something. You're like, right, I want some lightning here. I highly recommend using this technique to sort of get that early stages in, but then eventually down the line I suggest using one of the other options where it's like create your own textures and then sort of adjust them that way, and just like we shall do in the second part of this video. But I just wanted to show you this because I think it's quite handy to know it. So we're also going to need ourselves 0.2 in the radius, because that's going to set us a radius like so, and obviously if it was any bigger it's going to cover the whole screen. So we want to keep it in between there, and you can already see we've got some motion going on. And then to make it slightly more crazy, we're going to add a sine node in, so it becomes a little bit more jittery. And then we're just going to top it off with another radial gradient node, which we will multiply together. And this will just give us the sort of edges cut off here and here to make it a bit more of a sort of a electrical texture that's moving in real time. And we will plug that into opacity, and then we will give it a particle color as well. Yep, like so. And then what else, what we want to do is we actually want to grab ourselves a subtract. Now what we're going to do with the subtract is we're going to control it on the parameter. It's 0 to 1. And we're going to grab ourselves a dynamic parameter. And we're going to plug it in here, and we're going to call it just checking that works. We're going to call it dissolve. And we don't need to multiply. Actually, we do need to multiply. And then we're going to just multiply in the alpha as well, so we can have it sort of fade out. Like so. Perfect. So now you can't see anything, which is perfectly fine, and that's because the dynamic parameter is automatically set to 1. So we're going to go back here, go into Niagara, and we're going to make ourselves a new diagram system. And we're going to start off with the fountain, since it's got some parameters that we have that we could use. ns underscore lightning shader. Or actually, let's call it something else. Shader lightning. So it's next to the other one. We're going to open this up. And we're going to go over to the sprite renderer, and we're going to search for our lightning shader. And we're going to get rid of the gravity force, the velocity, the drag, and also name this to shader lightning. And the reason it's not showing is because by default the dynamic parameter is set to 1. So if we set this to a curve and we make this a hill, we should start to see it come in like so. And then what we can also do actually is, if we grab ourselves a color, I think, yep, that works. Going to a color curve, put another point down, give it maybe 50, 100, and then this can be blue. Well, there's some bleed going on there, we don't want that. Also, there's a lot here. Let's bump that right down to 5. Let's say 10. That's 0, lovely. 10. And also, this is way too high, so let's bump that right down to so. Oh, that might be a little too fast, but 3.5. That's more like it. And then, I think this needs to be... It might just be better to do it this way. 100. That's not 100. Yeah, it won't go any higher than 100. This is the sort of limitations with this. It's sort of, yeah, you don't really have much control over a lot. But as I said, I did just want to show it to you because it is another way for us to make lightning. So let me just grab the location of this, pop it here so we are in line with each other. And we are all going to make these a lot bigger and have them in local space as well. Oh, that could be even bigger. Something like this. And maybe we could make the shape location slightly bigger as well. Yeah, cool. So this one is the lightning shader, and it's a sort of, as I said, it's a more technique towards making it so you know, it's more of a block out stage, I'd say. I definitely sort of approach this with a headspace in mind. I'm losing words here. That it's not finalized, it's not going to look fantastic, it's just purely block out stage for, hey, I want some lightning here, or electricity, or whatever you decide to do. Of course, the way I'm making these are more balls of lightning slash and look more towards electricity, so I do apologise, but this is the fastest way to showcase how something works, to make it infinite, and you can imagine that if I were to make some sort of lightning bolt, the ribbon would take a lot more time to do, considering I'd have to sort of make it zigzag down, which involves moving the ribbon and so forth, which unfortunately I wasn't able to show you. And in this case, if you look closely, you can see that it's based off the texture information, which means majority of this texture is just like circles, and then sometimes it gets branched out like this, which is what I was going for. However, you know, from a distance I could see that, oh yeah, there's some electricity or something going on over there, and it looks fairly decent. And then as you get closer and closer and closer, you'll start to see it sort of maybe isn't what you're going for. It definitely has a much more realistic feel to it, and I definitely feel this one is more towards specifically electricity rather than lightning. And both of them, as I said, take this sort of same approach, same motion. So that's why, as I mentioned in the last video, I will just be mentioning both of them throughout this section. So I hope that's okay. But yeah, that's sort of the shader electricity in a nutshell. And right now I shall be going onto the final one, which is the one that I tend to do majority of the time and is my preferred option, and that is using a normal texture. And I'm just giving these thumbnails so they're a lot easier to know which one's which. You can just click the thumbnail button, and then when you save it, it gives it a little bit of a thumbnail. There we go, cool. So, I hope that one was fairly understandable. The shader isn't that big at all, and you can do some other bits and pieces with it, but this is just the fast track version. So we're going to close that, and we're going to head over to our material, and we're going to make a new material, and we're going to call it m_sprite lightning or electricity, but they always get so small. Cool. So we're going to make this translucent and unlit again. We're going to grab ourselves a texture, and we're going to then grab ourselves our sprite that we made. So let's turn off engine content so it's easier to find, like so. And we're going to get ourselves a particle color. And then what we're going to do is something slightly different to what we usually do. We are going to saturate this so it stays 0 to 1, and then we're going to 1 minus, and we are going to then add 0.01, and this will sort of act as our dissolve for the texture. So to help with the dissolve, we're going to need an envelope, and we're going to then put the the 1 into the alpha, which is going to act as our dissolve for the texture. And then we're also going to have it inverse itself, so we're going to put that into the A of it, and we're just going to get that a little bit more visible. There we go. And then the texture is the basically the alpha of the dissolve, so that is going to go into the value. And then we're going to just plug it in as usual, add a depth fade in, and we're going to plug this into the opacity, and then the emissive color will just go straight into here. Now, this does look slightly thick, but that's fine. It's meant to look like that. As you'll see later on, that we will sort of change it out. And if you think it doesn't quite work, we can also add a power in to reduce it slightly. but that's probably a little bit too much, so let's drop that to 1.5. 1 is normal, 1.5, yeah, that should be okay. So if we save that, and we go over to our Niagara, and we make ourselves a new Niagara system. Just for the easiness of it, we're going to add ourselves another fountain, and call it n_sprite lightning. And this is my more enjoyable one. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete the velocity, delete the gravity, delete the drag. We're going to add ourselves, actually no, we have scale color, that's perfect. We're going to grab ourselves the material, and it is this one. And because it's a sprite, if you guys remember, let's drop this to 5. It spawns the sprite as it is, which means it's the 2x2 sprite. So we need to make some adjustments to sort that out. So first things first is we need to head over to sub-UV, and we need to make it 2x2. Perfect, we've done it. And you can see also that it's dissolving already, but that doesn't look very good because it's super slow. So let me change that real quick. Awesome. But yeah, so what I was saying is we've done that, but of course it's only using the first frame. So we need to grab ourselves a sub-UV animation. We need to select the sprite renderer so the warning goes away, and then we change this to random because we just want it to pick random frames. We don't care for what sort of start frame and end frame it is. We don't want it to be... Yeah, I don't know why that was on every frame. That was weird. We don't want it to be on every frame. We just want it to spawn one frame, like so. And then we can also actually drop this even lower, I think. Yeah, perfect. And then what we want to do is we want to grab ourselves... well, we know that these are going to be really small otherwise, so we're going to make them a bit bigger. And then give ourselves a bit of a bigger space to work with. Bump up this number. Maybe it's a bit too high. And maybe this is still too small. Maybe it's 100. And then we're going to get some colour in there. So let's grab that. And this time the colour curve should work because textures are a lot better. And ooh, that looks nice. I like the look of that. So we're going to have that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just scale it down 50. So if we do 50, and then if we make this 1 in blue, so it still goes down to blue, and then this becomes, ooh, that could work. That looks kind of nice. Let's see that. So let's just grab the lightning here, paste, pop it over here. So the thing with this is, personally, it's my favorite out of the 3 to work with. Of course, you could do this with even like lightning strike textures. You could do it with just a single sprite of lightning. But of course, in the previous one of our previous modules, we made the texture where it's super simple in Photoshop. We added a bit of a bloom to it, and there's 4 different shapes, and it didn't really take us that long. So definitely good to have some different shapes in there. So my only thought process about this is a little too high. The bloom is flashing a little too much. But then you do lose out on that sort of powerful feeling. So maybe I will keep it that way. And then what I'll also do is I'll lower this again, so it's even faster, like so. And then what you can also do is, that's probably too much. Oh, that is way too much. Something like that. And then of course the size is not very different, so you could sort of readjust that. So you have all different sort of sizes. And we'll call this sprite lightning. Give this a save. So now we have a dissolve in here, and we have the lightning appearing. The one thing else you can do is in the shader, you can do the classic. In fact, you know what? It's probably just better if we just copy and paste it over. If you guys remember, oh, actually, I think I did it in this one. Yes. If we just grab ourselves this little setup here, and we can go delete that. We can blood this in here, and this works for the sprites as well. Of course, that's really crazy, and then it starts to repeat itself. So you're gonna want to drop it even more, about half, and then that just looks a lot even better. So you have lightning, and that is sort of even more zigzaggy because of the way that's happening. And then, you know, for performance reasons, you're like, oh, the sprites are massive. You could go into, I need to close this, you need to go into the renderer, go down to cutout, and you should be able to just use that. It doesn't always, well, it should just be red channel. There we go. Now we have some cutout lightning, which is much more performant. And yeah, that looks really cool. And my use case for this would sort of be maybe in an AoE attack that is, in fact, sort of something we're making as the final part for section 10, where a couple of these would spawn, like do-do-do-do, and then a circle would appear, and then a lightning strike would come down and then make an explosion on the ground. And that's when I would sort of use these sprites coming in. Of course, if I am going for a more stylized, realistic look for this particular effect, maybe I'll start with something like this instead and do the same process where it's like a da-da-da-da, and then there's like a lightning strike and then it bursts out. But in a much more realistic sense, that doesn't happen. There tends to just be a lightning strike that just comes down and waits and just explodes. However, when it comes to stylize, you might want to just sort of add that little bit of extra spice to it, and you could sort of do sort of like an attack from a character in the game. They sort of put down their lightning attack, it spawns the radius of where it's going to spawn, maybe there's a delay, spawn some of these particles, and then the strike comes down to hit the opponent. Now, another thing that we could do in here is we could also make the make a curve for the size, so they sort of spawn outwards like this. But the only problem with this is we do then lose our color. Lose our emissive color. That's what I was talking about. So what you can do is you could sort of just start it and have them shrink as well. Now you do lose the dissolve like this, so the best case scenario is actually use a heal, but then just make it as close to this as you possibly can. 5 might actually be fine, and then you bump this up to 4. Okay, 4 is way too big. 2. Okay, never mind. That, like, this works because they sort of scale up, but you would potentially need to adjust the location of these if that decides to move. So then as they scale up, the emissive is still there. I wish you could grab 2 points at once. That would be so handy. Yeah, this sort of works. So it still has the emissive, it's not as bright, and that's because of just the way this timing is for this hill. It might even better to just actually give this some proper numbers, like 1 and 1. And then that could sort of curve up there like that. So it could, and then maybe curve this. Oh yeah, that's nice. So it scales up really fast, hits the peak with the emissive, and then just dissolves outwards to disappear. Awesome. So yeah, that is both of them. Let me just get a thumbnail for this. That is both of the lightnings I wanted to go over today. I will admit that I do have my favourites, being this one. But of course, you guys can try both out, see which one, or all three to be honest, see which one you prefer, see which one you want to expand on. I will personally say that in the time I gave roughly about the same time for each effect, I'd say around 10 minutes. This one did have slightly longer. Oh, sorry, these two were made in, it's 10 minutes for these. And yeah, about 15 minutes for this almost. And even then, like, I'm not a big fan of this one. However, I did still manage to achieve something. Which reminds me actually that I do actually want to change this colour so it matches the rest of the... There we go, that looks better. Perfect. There we go. Nice. Makes you feel a lot more like, oh, there's different examples there. So, yeah. Personally, the one that you can perfect the most within a short amount of time is definitely the texture one. The texture, you know, took about 10-15 minutes to make in Photoshop. You take it over, you make a dissolved material, or you dissolve it with another texture, with the subtract, and yeah, you can make something quite nice. This one is more on the block out side of things, in my opinion. The other reason I say that is because if you click on it, you have a lot of space that you're not going to be using. That's going to cause a lot of overdraw. So for performance wise, it's really not going to be good. And of course, as I said, the more closer you get, the less it starts to look like lightning and more splodgy. And that's just the way the Motion 4 Chaos node works on textures. Of course, you could adjust the numbers, but again, you're just going to fall into the trap of, because you're using a radial gradient, you do actually have this problem. Now, there is a solution for that, and it is that because you have taken the effect into the Niagara, you can still cut it out if you have if you had a circle, which I think the what's it called, sphere, yes, sphere mask, there we go, which that didn't work because I have it on. Yeah, so you can actually use a sphere mask to make it more performant, which I just completely didn't think about. So yeah, that works. That's not necessarily a bad thing in the end. If you do like that version, you can just grab yourself the sphere mask, which is in the engine content, or make your own. And then when we come to the ribbon lightning, it's probably, just give this a save, it's probably my least favourite in terms of making it and just trying to get it right. However, in terms of motion and what you can do with it and how ribbons are just so random, and already this is just something really quick, but we've got like a lot of randomness in it. It is the best when you're trying to go for realistic effects for lightning. And I will say that obviously my sort of texture I've used is a little bit more stylized, but if you just get a good texture to make it look realistic, and then sort of like make a cool trail in the shader, you'll get something quite nice. Awesome. So that is the end of the lightning electricity module. I hope you guys have enjoyed and learned something. I shall leave access to everything I've made in here if you need this texture and you didn't make it previously. And for the final section, we are going to be doing a sort of AoE effect where it's going to be sort of a brief spawn, maybe a circle or something for the impact location, and there'll be some sort of lightning coming down or flash or something, and then we'll have an impact AoE that will hit the ground. So that video will be for section 10, and yeah, I'll see you guys then.